In the second week of April, 1241, two European armies were annihilated in two separate battles, fought 2 days apart, more than 400 miles from each other. At Legnica, in Poland, an army of knights and mercenaries was surrounded and cut down almost to the last man. At Mohi, in Hungary, the royal army was pinned against a river and destroyed. Both defeats came from the same enemy, a force that had covered more ground in a single winter than most European armies managed in a decade. Kings and commanders across the continent could not explain what they were seeing. Scouts reported enemy columns appearing in places no army could possibly reach. Warnings arrived describing attacks that had already happened. Europe was not facing a larger army, it was facing a faster one. And the source of that speed was not a machine, not a weapon, and not some secret science. It was an animal, a grazing animal, roughly 1,000 pounds, that human beings had pulled out of the wild thousands of years earlier and turned into the most important military, economic, and political technology in human history. Empires rose because they had it. Empires collapsed because they did not. For 5,000 years, the fastest thing on Earth that a human being could control was a horse. And that single fact quietly decided who ruled the world. That was 1241. But the story of the horse begins long before knights and empires, on a cold, windswept ocean of grass in Central Asia. It also begins, strangely enough, in America. The first horses evolved in North America roughly 55 million years ago. And the earliest of them would have been almost unrecognizable, a forest browser about the size of a small dog. Over millions of years, as forests gave way to open grassland, that animal grew taller, faster, and harder to catch, until it became the long-legged, single-hoofed runner we would recognize today. Herds spread west across the Bering Land Bridge into Asia and Europe, and then, roughly 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, horses vanished completely from the American continents where they had been born. Climate change and human hunting likely finished them off. Remember that detail, because it comes back later in this story in a way almost nobody saw coming. For thousands of years afterward, the surviving horses of Europe and Asia knew human beings in exactly one way, as predators. At a site called Solutré in eastern France, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of tens of thousands of horses, accumulated over centuries of organized hunts. To the people of the Stone Age, a horse was not transportation, it was meat. The change came on the steppes of Central Asia, somewhere around 5,500 years ago. In what is now northern Kazakhstan, archaeologists studying a culture known as the Botai found horse teeth worn down in a distinctive pattern, the kind of wear that comes from a bit held in the mouth. They found pottery containing traces of mare's milk. Someone on that grassland had stopped hunting horses and started keeping them, milking them, and at some point, climbing onto their backs. Think about what that first ride actually meant. A wild horse is a half-ton prey animal built to explode into motion at the first hint of a predator, and a human being on its back registers as exactly that. Whoever first mounted a horse and stayed on was performing one of the most consequential acts of courage in human history, and they had no idea. On foot, a healthy human covers perhaps 20 miles in a day. On horseback, that number triples. For the first time since our species began walking, the horizon itself moved. At the time, it looked like a herdsman's trick. It turned out to be the beginning of a new kind of world. The first civilizations to weaponize the horse did not ride it, they hitched it. Around 4,000 years ago, on the steppe east of the Ural Mountains, a people known as the Sintashta built something revolutionary. A light, two-wheeled cart with spoked wheels instead of solid ones. It weighed a fraction of the old solid-wheeled wagons, and behind a team of horses, it became the fastest vehicle on the planet. The chariot was the superweapon of the Bronze Age, and it spread the way superweapons always spread, through conquest. Around 1650 BC, A foreign people the Egyptians called the Hyksos rolled into the Nile Delta with horses and chariots. And Egypt, one of the oldest and proudest civilizations on Earth, had no answer. For roughly a century, foreigners ruled Egyptian soil. The Egyptians responded the only way they could. They copied the weapon, bred the horses, built a chariot corps of their own, drove the invaders out, and became an empire. By 1274 BC, at a place in modern Syria called Kadesh, Pharaoh Ramesses II and the Hittite Empire threw somewhere around 5,000 chariots at each other, in the largest chariot battle ever recorded. Kings now had themselves carved into temple walls at the reins of a chariot team. The horse had been part of human life for barely 1,000 years, and it was already the difference between an empire and a memory. Then someone did the obvious thing that was not obvious at all. They got off the chariot and onto the horse itself. By around 900 BC, the Assyrians were fielding true cavalry, archers and lancers, fighting from horseback, faster and cheaper than any chariot, and able to cross ground no wheel could survive. And out on the steppe, entire peoples like the Scythians were now born into the saddle, mounted archers who could fire behind them at full gallop and vanish before an infantry line could react. Settled civilizations learned to fear the sound of hooves on the horizon. One story from this era says more about the bond between humans and horses than any battle. In Macedonia, around 344 BC, a horse dealer offered King Philip II a magnificent black stallion that no one could ride. The horse reared and lashed out at every groom who approached. Philip's 12-year-old son noticed something everyone else had missed. The horse was not vicious. It was afraid of its own shadow. The boy turned the stallion toward the sun so the shadow fell behind it, calmed it, and rode. Philip is said to have told his son to seek a larger kingdom because Macedonia was too small for him. The boy was Alexander, the horse was Bucephalus, and together they conquered everything from Greece to the edge of India. When Bucephalus died on campaign in 326 BC, Alexander did something no general had ever done for an animal. He founded a city and named it after his horse. The next revolution was small enough to hold in one hand. Sometime around the 4th century AD, riders in China began using a simple bent frame of metal hanging from the saddle, a place to put your feet. The stirrup sounds like nothing. It changed everything. A rider standing in stirrups could absorb the shock of impact, which meant a rider could now couch a lance, charge at full gallop, and deliver the combined momentum of horse and man onto a single point without being thrown from the saddle. When the stirrup reached Europe around the 8th century, it helped create the single most iconic figure of the medieval world, the armored knight. And many historians argue it created far more than that. A knight needed war horses, armor, and years of training, and all of that needed money. So kings began granting land in exchange for mounted military service. That arrangement, land for cavalry, became the skeleton of feudalism itself. The entire social pyramid of medieval Europe, lords, vassals, and peasants, balanced to a remarkable degree on the back of a war horse. The French word for horse is cheval. The code of the mounted warrior became chivalry. Europe did not just ride the horse. Europe organized itself around it. But no civilization ever fused with the horse more completely than the one that produced the fastest-moving empire in human history. If you are enjoying this story, take 1 second and hit subscribe, because there is a new deep dive like this every week, and you will not want to miss the next one. In the early 1200s, Genghis Khan united the nomadic tribes of Mongolia, a people who learned to ride almost before they learned to walk. Every Mongol warrior traveled with 3 to 5 spare horses, switching mounts throughout the day so that no single animal tired. Columns could cover up to 100 miles in a day, a pace European armies would not match until the invention of the railroad 6 centuries later. Riders could sleep in the saddle, and on desperate marches, they could survive on mare's milk and even small amounts of their horse's blood. The empire ran on an official relay network called the Yam, stations stocked with fresh horses so that a message could cross 200 miles in a single day. This was the machine that produced the impossible reports of 1241, armies appearing where no army could be. At its height, the Mongol Empire stretched from Korea to the gates of Vienna, roughly 9 million square miles, the largest contiguous land empire that has ever existed. It was built almost entirely on grass and horseflesh. One species had carried a nation of herders to the edge of ruling the known world. And now that detail from the beginning of this story comes back. The Americas, the birthplace of the horse, had spent 10,000 years without a single one. No civilization there, not the Maya, not the Aztec, not the Inca, had ever seen a human move faster than a run. Then, in 1493, on Columbus's second voyage, horses crossed the Atlantic in the holds of Spanish ships. In 1519, Hernán Cortés landed on the coast of Mexico with roughly 600 men and just 16 horses, and those 16 animals hit the Aztec world with the force of science fiction. Some early accounts describe warriors initially unsure whether horse and rider were a single creature. In 1532, in the Andes, Francisco Pizarro faced the emperor of the Inca at Cajamarca with fewer than 200 men, about 60 of them mounted. The cavalry charge that followed helped capture the ruler of an empire of millions in a single afternoon. Disease, politics, and steel did much of the work of conquest, but the horse was its spearhead. And there is a brutal irony buried in this chapter. The animal that helped bring down the civilizations of the Americas was returning to the continent where its own species had been born. Yet the horse did not only serve the conquerors. Spanish herds escaped, strayed, and multiplied, and after the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, scattered thousands of animals across the plains. The horse reached the indigenous nations of North America. What happened next was one of the fastest cultural transformations ever recorded. Within 3 generations, peoples like the Comanche and the Lakota rebuilt their entire world around the horse, hunting buffalo at full gallop and fielding some of the finest light cavalry on earth. For nearly 2 centuries, mounted plains nations held the most powerful armies on the continent to a standstill. The horse did not care who rode it. It made whoever mastered it formidable. The end of the horse's reign came suddenly, and it came in 2 blows. The first fell in the mud of the First World War. In 1914, every major power still counted cavalry among its elite forces, and then those forces rode into the age of the machine gun and barbed wire. 5,000 years of mounted warfare ended in about 4 years. But the horses did not leave the war. They hauled the guns, the ammunition, the wounded, and the supplies through shell fire and freezing mud, and they died in numbers that are difficult to comprehend. Somewhere around 8 million horses were killed in the First World War. The United States shipped nearly 1 million animals across the Atlantic. Almost none came home. It was the largest sacrifice of animal life in the history of human conflict, and it is almost never mentioned. The second blow came not from an enemy, but from an engine. And here is the detail most people miss, because it explains everything that came after. In the 1770s, a Scottish engineer named James Watt needed a way to sell his steam engine to people who measured all work in animals, so he calculated what one strong horse could pull and called his unit of measurement horsepower. The machine age named its own strength after the animal it was about to replace. For a while, cities actually needed more horses than ever, moving the goods that trains delivered, and it nearly buried them. By the 1890s, New York City alone relied on well over 100,000 working horses, producing millions of pounds of manure every single day. In 1894, one London newspaper famously predicted that within 50 years, every street in the city would lie buried under 9 feet of it. In 1898, delegates at an international city planning conference in New York reportedly broke up early because no one could solve the problem. The solution arrived 4 years ahead of schedule and parked at the curb. In 1908, Henry Ford's Model T made the automobile affordable, and within 25 years, the working horse had all but vanished from American streets. After 5,000 years of empire building, the horse was not defeated by any rival. It was retired by a machine that carried its name. And yet the story did not end. There are roughly 60 million horses in the world today. In the United States alone, the horse industry generates over $100 billion in economic activity, from racetracks to ranches. A single champion racehorse has sold for as much as $70 million. Police horses still work city streets. Therapy programs use horses to help veterans with post-traumatic stress and children with disabilities, because something in the animal's presence reaches people when words cannot. Out in the American West, tens of thousands of wild mustangs still run free, living descendants of the conquistadors' escaped herds. An American animal that left, circled the world for 10,000 years, and came home. And on the steppes of Mongolia, where riding may have begun, herds of Przewalski's horse, a wild species that once went completely extinct in the wild, gallop again across the grassland, brought back from a handful of zoo survivors. The next time you hear a car advertised by its horsepower, understand what you are actually hearing. You are hearing the ghost of the animal that carried every empire you have ever read about. The pyramids of Egypt were guarded by chariot armies. The knights of Europe, the Khans of the steppe, the conquest of 2 continents, the mail, the plow, the wagon, the war, all of it moved at the speed of a horse. Human beings spent 50 centuries in the saddle, and the moment we built something faster, we climbed down and almost forgot the animal that carried us there. But the horse has not forgotten how to be what it was. Watch one run flat out across an open field sometime. No rider, no bridle, no empire on its back, and you will see the exact thing that made a Stone Age herder on the Kazakh steppe risk everything to climb on. The fastest thing on Earth a human could control. The animal that conquered every empire on Earth by carrying all of them. If this story surprised you, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling me which part of the horse's history you never knew. And give this video a like so more people can find it. There are more stories like this on the way, and the next one is already saddled up.